Windows tests, you're going to use what I call the network testing toolbox. There are tools built into Windows programs. They're already there. They're in your PC right now, and you use these tools to do various kinds of network testing. And you get to those tools by the command line. And the command line is accessible in Windows XP by going to Start, clicking Run, and then typing in CMD, Charlie Mary David. And what that's going to bring you to is it's going to bring you to the command line. And the two commands, we're going to use three commands today. One is the ping command. The other one is the ipconfig /all command. And that gives us IP information. And we're also going to use traceroute. And I'm going to show you how to use that just a little bit later. But let's start off with getting to the command line. We go to Start, we go to Run, we type CMD, and you're going to see something like this. And for those of us who are old school, it's the DOS prompt. It's got the C and the colon and the slashes, and then your directories and your files and that sort of thing. It's a good old DOS prompt, but this is where your network testing toolbox sits. So it's here that the first thing we want to do, if we are walking into the installation cold, and we would do this during the survey process. We would come up, let's say it's Bob's Body Shop. We'd come up to Tony's computer. Hey, Tony, let me look at your computer there for a minute, buddy. You're going to go to the command line, and you're going to type ipconfig /all. Caps or lowercase, doesn't matter. Make sure you got the space there, though. And then it's going to give you information like this. Here you see where I did ipconfig /all to one of the PCs on my network. Let's look down here in the middle. And what do we see? We see the physical address. That's also the MAC address. And so it's 6 groups of 2 characters, letters and numbers. Then you see where it says DHCP enabled. It says yes. What does that mean? It means this computer got a dynamic address from the DHCP server. Then you see the IP address, 192.168.1.102. That's the IP address of the Ethernet adapter, my wired adapter. It also shows me the subnet mask and the default gateway. So right here, what I call the 4 magic keys, IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and port numbers. Those are the things you got to program into any IP device. Doesn't matter if it's new or not. From this one test, we get 2 of our magic keys. The default gateway will be the same for every single device on the network. And I'm going to explain what that is a little later, but trust me, it's the same on every device. The subnet mask will be the same if it's Bob's Body Shop at least, and it's a small network. It'll be the same on every single device. This is a Class C default subnet mask, 255.255.255.0. So we got 2 of our magic keys right there. Now we look at the IP address, 192.168.1, and we say, okay, now we know that this network, this Class C network, is 192.168.1. Then for our devices, our cameras and our 2040 that we want to connect to this network, the first 3 groups of that address, that local address that we're going to put in the cameras and we're going to put in the NVR, the first 3 groups must be exactly the same. In this case, 192.168.1. That's important to know because if you programmed your 2040, its IP address 192.168.3 something, guess what? It won't talk to this network at all. It will not communicate. You've got to match those first 3 groups of the address. So your devices, the new devices you're putting on, are going to be 192.168.1 something. Okay? So one of the things you can do, and what you need to do, is make sure you're not going to duplicate IP addresses. So with the username and password that you have, you would go into the router, and the router, where's the router? The router is the default gateway. Notice that you see here in my Linksys router, it says it's router IP, the local IP address 192.168.1.1. So I'm going to go to Internet Explorer, and I'm going to type in http://192.168.1.1. Up comes a username password challenge from the router. I put that information in. Then I'm going to start seeing screens like this, and I'm going to look for the DHCP server. And here you see it. DHCP server is enabled, and its starting address is 1.100. It issues 3 addresses, so it's going to issue 1.100, 1.101, and 1.102. Those addresses, we do not want to put those addresses in our cameras or in our Nuo 2040. Those are reserved for the DHCP users. we have the availability of a total in a Class C network of 254 addresses. The valid addresses in this last box right here can be from .1 to .254. So we got 254 addresses. The only ones we can't use are from 1.100 to 1.102 and 1.1, which is the router's address. It's important to note here that whatever IP addresses you select for your cameras and for your NVR, your 2040, it doesn't matter if the numbers are high or low. They're all equivalent. It's not better to have a lower number or a higher number in that address range from 1 to 254. Just make sure you're not duplicating the address on the local network. So that you're not duplicating addresses, as well as doing other network, checking out other network stuff, one of the most valuable of your toolboxes, of your tools in the toolbox, is the ping command. The ping command is like the screwdriver of network testing. You use it all the time. Ping tells us when we launch a ping at a target IP address on the local network or on the internet, if we get a response, then we know that there is a device on the network that is using that particular address. And it's a very basic tool of local network and internet testing. Now, in some cases, ping won't work over the internet, but that's okay. In the local network, 99% of the time the devices are programmed to respond to a ping. So here's how we're going to use this. We're going to use it to test for our unused IP addresses. Let's say that we looked at the DHCP server and we saw that it issues addresses from 1.100 to 1.102, and we've decided we're going to use 1.200. That'll be the address, the static IP address we're going to put in our 2040. Well, we need to make sure it's not in use. How do we do that? First of all, make sure that your cameras and your 2040 are not connected to the network or not powered up. Either way, they're not working at this point prior to the test. Then make sure that the customer has turned on all of their desktop, laptops, and other devices. Okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to ping that address. You go to your command line, you type ping space 192.168.1.200, and if you get what I got here, which is 4 requests timed out, that means, hey, there's nothing out there on the network at the time we did the test that is using IP address 1.200, which means it's perfectly good for our use. And you're going to select, remember, you're going to select static IPs for your cameras, whether they're wired or wireless, static IPs. You're going to do the same test for them to make sure that the IP addresses you've selected are not in use by anything else. It's simple once you start practicing with this stuff. If you find that the address is in use, pick another number and test that one. If it tests good, then you're good to go, okay? So here's what we've got. We've gone to Bob's Body Shop, and we've looked at his local network, and what do we see? We see he's got 2 PCs that are getting DHCP addresses, 1.100 and 1.101. Now, the router switch, the blue Linksys box, it's a router. It has 2 IP addresses for reasons that I'll explain later, but basically there's one for the local network and one for the next network. You can kind of think about the router as being, think about a line going down the center, and what's on the right-hand side is a local network, and what's on the left is going up to the internet. So the router has 2 addresses, one for the local network, one for the internet, and you see those addresses here. Then we've got our DSL adapter. Our DSL adapter is also a router, and it has 2 addresses. You can look at that and think of a line kind of bisecting it, and there's the blue line going to the right. That's its local connection over to the router. There's a little network there. Between the DSL adapter and the router, there's a network. There's 2 devices only on it, but there's one little network there. It is a network that is 172.16, right? And then the DSL adapter has another IP address. That's its public IP address. The address that faces the internet. That's the address that's there. Now, because we had to add some switch ports to this device, we've got a new network switch going up here in the middle of the screen, up to our new network switch, and here's where we're going to plug in our 4 cameras and our new 2040. Those cameras are going to have IP addresses that we've just picked from 1.205 to 208. And the 2040 is going to have the IP address 192.168.1.200. So this, we now know how we're going to address our devices. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we would take our cameras, we would power them up, and you'll have to read the instructions of the cameras and work with them to put in the IP addresses, the subnet mask, the default gateway, and the port numbers of the cameras. And that's a discussion beyond what we're going to talk about today. But what I will tell you is I'm going to show you how to do it on the new 2040, and the same thing applies to each of the cameras in basic terms. All IP devices are the same. They're just like cars. Every car is exactly the same. Dave, what are you talking about? Yeah, they're all the same. You know, they got a steering wheel, they got a gas pedal, they got a brake pedal, they got a shifter, and they got a key. Well, every network device, I don't care what it is, has got an IP address, a subnet mask, a default gateway, and a port number, or ports plural. That's the way they all get programmed. Doesn't matter what the device is. So you're going to learn here, when I show you how to program the 2040, it'll tell you how to program the cameras as well, at least give you a general idea. Another thing to keep in mind here, ladies and gentlemen, if you're smart and you did a careful survey of your customer's location and their network, you could program everything you see in the upper right-hand side of this screen. You could program and test it at your office and have everything programmed and ready to go, carry it out to the customer site, and virtually plug and play. Just plug it in. Now, to get our